From Ultimate Rival to glorified Badnik, the fall of Metal Sonic happened before our very eyes. However, the Sonic Movie 4 can do something crazy by bringing this character back to who he once was. Let's get into it. Hopefully by now you've seen the post-credit scene for the Sonic Movie 3, where Metal Sonic, or Metal Sonics, gang up on Sonic, all to be destroyed by Amy Rose. Out of all of the characters that we've seen so far in the movie, I feel like Metal Sonic looks the closest to game accurate, and I think that's a close contest between characters like Tails and Knuckles, who literally look spot on. But as the trend has been so far with these post-credit scenes for the Sonic movies, expect to see Metal Sonic as a major character in the next movie getting a lot of screen time. And within the potential maybe hour and 40-minute screen time, I would honestly say expect to see some huge changes in Metal Sonic. And I'm not talking about from a characterization or design perspective, but more so from a substance perspective. In the past, whenever I've talked about Metal Sonic's regression, I've always attacked him from a character perspective, saying that he's gotten worse as a character over time, which I don't think is necessarily true. The real problem with Metal Sonic is his substance. The way in which he's utilized in these games or shows or whatever he may appear in is always just not right. However, it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention the few times where Metal Sonic in recent years has just been really good. Like, for example, the Sonic Mania Adventures animation, or even Sonic X Shadow Generations, which I don't really know if I want to count this one just because it's not even really the Metal Sonic I'm talking about, it's Neo Metal Sonic, or I guess in this case, Metal Overlord. But outside of those few exceptions, I really can't help but feel underwhelmed whenever I see Metal Sonic in just about anything. I want to begin this discussion of Metal Sonic talking about Sonic Colors Ultimate for a second. Now, to be fair, Sonic Colors is already a game I'm not a huge fan of. I actually really don't care for the game that much, so I'll be doing my best to speak as objectively as possible when saying this, but Metal Sonic doesn't really add anything of value to the game to me. You might say it's cool that you can race him in certain levels, and yeah, I might agree with that, but even still, I think it cheapens his character. It makes him feel like more of a gimmick than an actual character, which is a problem because here, he lacks actual substance. I think it's insanely ironic that the Sonic Colors Rise of Wisp animation does Metal Sonic much better than the actual game. In the Rise of Wisp animation, Metal Sonic actually presents himself as a real threat. They have him utilizing Wisp and even outpacing Sonic at one point. Throughout the entire animation, he doesn't say anything, and I don't think he ever needs to say anything just because you always get what he's trying to say or do just by his body language and actions. Yes, this animation does have its fair share of goofy moments, like towards the end when Orbot and Cubot try to merge with him. I think that's a little silly. Maybe that's not something I'd want Metal Sonic to do, but I mean, I can't really get upset about it. It's just humor in a cartoon. Like, I can't get that mad. I mean, to say a scene like this ruins Metal Sonic's characterization for the whole animation is just kinda silly. It's not like the evil Guac scene in the Sonic Movie 3. Metal Sonic didn't do anything here. It was more so Orbot and Cubot than anyone else. Also, going off track for just a quick second, I don't even think Evil Guac is that bad, so just don't get mad at me. But jumping right back to the point here, you see that Metal Sonic actually is supposed to be a character as opposed to just this weird off-brand gimmick. He's not supposed to be this, like, little ghost running thing that Sonic just competes against. And yeah, sure, if you don't think Colors Ultimate's the best example, let's turn your attention to other games, like Sonic Forces. From a technicality standpoint, Metal Sonic actually isn't in this game. He's an illusion created by the Phantom Ruby. This maybe makes sense in a bubble. If you're just looking at Sonic Forces and no other games outside of that, yeah, sure, this can pass. Metal Sonic being an illusion, that's fine. But if you look at it from a holistic perspective, it really doesn't make any sense. You mean to tell me that Eggman went to war with the entire world and didn't think to make an actual Metal Sonic one time? We just have the Phantom Ruby and that's it? Now, you see, my first counterpoint to this was that perhaps Eggman didn't really create anything in this game and everything was created actually by the Phantom Ruby. But this point begins to fall flat when you realize that Eggman recreated the Egg Dragoon and also created multiple Death Egg robots just for this war. The Phantom Ruby creates weaker versions of the original characters, and we can tell this is true just by this one cutscene. If the Phantom Ruby was actually capable of making illusions that compared similarly in strength to these actual characters, then they would be a lot stronger than what we see here. Knowing that, why wouldn't someone like Eggman actually just recreate or reuse his real-life Metal Sonic? Now, honestly, it sounds like I'm making a case against Eggman, but really, it's against Metal Sonic because that just proves that Metal Sonic in this game was just another gimmick. The Phantom Ruby making an illusionary clone of Metal Sonic was essentially just another way of saying that the Phantom Ruby is capable of doing so many things, even creating your ultimate rival. During that initial E3 trailer for Sonic Forces, many people, myself included, were just so excited to see Chaos Zero, Metal Sonic, and Shadow as villains again. Little did we know that they actually weren't them. It was all just by design of the Phantom Ruby. If we're being realistic here, it makes a lot of sense why Eggman decided to make clones for characters like Shadow, Zavok, and Chaos Zero, but having the ammunition, willpower, and the ability to recreate Metal Sonic and yet choosing to make a clone of him is just silly, knowing that clone is going to be weaker. It doesn't help that the boss fight itself is also just abysmal. I mean, you're just chasing him down and then ramming into him every single time, but that's how most Sonic Forces boss fights are, but it just still doesn't do any justice for Metal Sonic's character, who's supposed to be this guy who is the ultimate rival for Sonic the Hedgehog. Even if he is just this weaker clone of the original, he should still be presented as somewhat of a threat, but he just doesn't feel that way at all in this game. Now on to the most recent story-based game that Metal Sonic actually is in, and that's Sonic Superstars. And no, he's not in the story, instead you just get to customize Metal Sonics. I do like this, and I do think it's cool, but I think it further feeds into the gimmick agenda. Instead of actually having him part of the story, or even just a character of substance, he's just relegated to just being this customizable option that you can use for your robot. This would be something that I think is a really cool thing to do after Metal Sonic has been re-established as this threatening character. But right now, it just seems as though he's just the gimmick character. Whenever they want to do something wacky or fun, they'll just throw him in there just because of it. Hopefully at this point you now understand, if you didn't already, the problems with Metal Sonic going forward. It's not a character problem, but a substance problem, which I think is a much easier fix. Switching gears here, let's take a look at the Sonic movies and what they've done for certain characters. But first, let's take a look at the Sonic Movie 1 and the games to follow after. With the Sonic Movie 1, Sonic had this new, electricity thing going on there, and the games after would actually include that. Games like Sonic Colors Ultimate would give you an option for the boost, and games like Frontiers would actually make him have that. So while this wasn't a character change, it was more of a stylistic change. Moving on to the Sonic Movie 2 and the games that would follow after that, like Sonic Frontiers, man oh man, I think it just kept getting better. Because for years, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but Knuckles was a character who really struggled to find himself. Knuckles, I feel, also had a substance and character issue. We were teetering around the time of him being a big oaf and just a nothing character. But after the Sonic Movie 2, we got games like Sonic Frontiers where not just Knuckles, but every character in it got a lot more detail and was just more expanded upon. Also, having an entire Sonic Frontiers prologue just dedicated to how Knuckles ended up on Ares Island was such a good idea and tied into the movie very nicely, just because it's more Knuckles content. Now on to the Sonic Movie 3 and Shadow the Hedgehog. With 2024 hosting the year of Shadow the Hedgehog, we were bound to see lots of changes in the character for the better, and of course, Sega delivered. Not only was he really fun to see in the Sonic Movie 3, but Sonic X Shadow Generation set the bar really high for this character going forward. Honestly, I think it might be the best writing Shadow has ever gotten in a long time. For far too long was he a character who was just edgy for the sake of being edgy. Instead, he's actually back to his roots and back to the character he's supposed to be. He's not trying to be cool anymore, he just is cool. These movies do some pretty crazy works for the characters, even doing some small works for the characters like I talked about with Sonic. So I'm expecting to see some huge changes in Metal Sonic, because I really do believe that this movie can make him a lot more intimidating and make him feel like an actual character again, rather than just a gimmick. Something I think about constantly when it comes to Metal Sonic and his best moments are something like the Sonic OVA, where he constantly compares himself to the actual Sonic and wanting to replace that Sonic. I said earlier that Metal Sonic is at his best when he's not talking, but he has one line towards the very end of the Sonic OVA where he says to Sonic there can only be one Sonic as he gets burned alive. He literally refuses Sonic's aid and his only way of survival just so he can say there can only be one Sonic as he accepts his death. Another thing that's worth talking about when talking about the good sides of Metal Sonic, especially in more recent years, is this page of the IDW comics. There are no actual words being said here. Metal Sonic doesn't say anything, yet you can feel the emotion that he has in just this one page. For those of you who don't know what's going on here, Metal Sonic is essentially touching this liquid that turns people into robots. Or in the actual words of the Sonic the Hedgehog universe, this liquid roboticizes people. Metal Sonic, being a robot, can touch this liquid and nothing happens, and as you can see here, nothing happens. What's illustrated by Metal Sonic's expression here isn't a look of surprise or shock, but rather a look of realization. This is the one thing that separates me from being the real Sonic. Metal Sonic is a deep character, but more than that, he's a character. And it's time the Sonic the Hedgehog series got that right again. And I think the movies can get us back on the right track. But what do you think about Metal Sonic? Do you think the movie can fix him? Is there any fixing that really needs to happen? Let me know in the comments section down below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe on the video if you enjoyed it. If you watched this far, I really hope you did. But anyway, this is your boy Sonic signing out. Have a super blessed day, y'all.
Why are you playing that trash?